Let me see if y'all gave me any donations. Let me see. I'm giving y'all all my wisdom, but where the donations at? Last donation to the school was Richard Harris. Somebody better get on their Cash App. Somebody better get on their Cash App. Cash.me/$FDMG school. I better get some donations. I'm about to hang up.
Peace, peace, peace. I am Philip Roundtree, and you are tuned into the January 10th edition of Rhetorically Speaking. Props to the two of you who are tuned in on IG Live. Salute to those of you who are watching on Facebook. And definitely want to show love to those who are watching on YouTube. Everybody go over to YouTube, hit the subscribe button. You know, you would have been able to see Dr. Umar talk about gifts, talking about making donations, and how important that is to the work that creators do. For him is allegedly building a school, and I hate to throw allegedly in front of it just because I want to believe in the brother, and I believe in the brother in certain areas. I just hope the school comes to fruition. You know, I sit and think about, peace, Leslie. I sit and think about every time we say like Richard Harris. That was the last donation that came through. I wonder what Richard Harris is sitting there doing right now. Right? Does he sit and think about where his $5, $10, $20 that he gave to Dr. Umar, where that money went for the school? You know, and we're going to be talking a lot about, well, I don't want to say a lot about, but we definitely going to be talking about donations tonight regarding the topics at hand. So, yeah, make these donations, cash that Quantify LLC, or just hit the share button. Right, that's a donation as well. I don't need anything monetarily. I'm not going to make money off of YouTube. I'm not going to make money off Facebook. I'm not going to be a influencer. I'm just going to be somebody who talks they talk, hopes people think critically, and you know, continue on this quest of black liberation. So definitely hit the share button if you do. Listen, I love that and I'll appreciate it. So it's been an interesting week. I thought I was going to be on here twice last week, at least twice, but I'm still trying to get my bearings. I'm trying to get it together, right? Get back to this. I don't want to call it a grind, because if I'm grinding, then I don't want to do it. I'm not a part of the grind culture that so many are a part of. I rest my ass off. Usually by 2-3 p.m. I am laying on the couch. Like my man Fishing, who was in the live a minute ago, I might be playing Call of Duty. Usually I'm watching Seinfeld or The Office or the same episode of Law and Order that I saw the previous week, because that's what they do. They only recycle the same 10 shows. But I don't live this grind culture, because once I get to the point where I'm grinding, then I don't know if I love it. You know what I mean? So I'm at this point in time, this place in my life where I'm seeking joy, I'm resting more, and I'm just trying to enjoy the process of the things that I do. And so anytime rhetorically becomes a chore, but becomes a job, then I'm probably not going to do it. You know, at one point after I was unceremoniously let go from radio, I was doing this 4 times a week, but we were in the middle of a pandemic. Nobody was moving anywhere. So I had nothing else to do but be on live. But that's since changed with just different things in my life. But also about donations, I want to show love to Envy McKee of the Envy McKee Show, who got my start, who gave me my start in radio unofficially. She sent me some bread for coming on her show throughout the 2022 year. It's the Envy McKee Show. Follow her on Instagram. She's just a dope sister who delves into the metaphysical, but she also is able to add social commentary, which is something that I enjoy. So she always brings me on Fridays on WURD here in Philly. You can stream it live from 7 to 10. And we often have discussions, and I'm glad that she values me enough, not only to just have me on her show, but to think that I was good enough for radio. Because if it wasn't for her, it's saying, yo, you're good at this, I wouldn't have never sent the email, and I never wouldn't end up here on Rhetorically Speaking. But she cashed me out, and so I want to say thank you, Envy. I appreciate you, and I always enjoy the time that we spend together on Fridays. But again, hashtag Quantify LLC. If you're feeling ever so inclined, I'd appreciate it. So we're going to get started. And I was debating what I was going to talk about tonight. That's a lie. That's a lie. I wasn't debating. I knew exactly what I was going to talk about tonight. I was going to talk about Damar Hamlin a little bit more. I was having a conversation with my homegirl earlier, Marla Harris Campbell. Salute to her. And we were just talking about this space right here, rhetorically speaking, and the purpose of it, why it is that I do what I do, and how a lot of people often peg me as being a contrarian, right? You say, hey, everybody goes left, I go right, right? And so it's something that I've always pushed back against because my whole goal is to have people think critically. So I'm reading some bell hooks right now. Teaching Critical Thinking is the book, and shoot me a message if you want a copy of the book. I'll definitely get you a PDF version of it. And so she was talking about a student of hers. She was teaching about she was talking about capitalism, and the student stood up and was just like, hey, real abrasive. Hey, I'm this evil capitalist person that you're talking about. Right? She was like, well, number one, let me correct you. Never said evil. Right? Because people have a way of throwing their thoughts and feelings, whether it's something they may be unconsciously feeling, and injecting into their conversations with you. Right? And so she said, no, I'm not here to tell you to be anti-capitalism. I might be anti-capitalism. Right? But that's not what I'm here to do. What I'm here to do is to offer differing perspectives to look at a situation. And you take that information and you do with it what you may. And so that's what this space is. So when I come on here to talk about Damar Hamlin, like I talked about it last week, when I talked about children playing violent sports like football, and I'm offering my thoughts about it, no, my daughter, neither my daughter nor my son will play football. That's me, right? I can't tell you what to do with yours. Only thing I can do is offer you information. And when I offer you information, you do what you can and will with it. You dig me? And so when I come back to Damar Hamlin this week, it's from a different perspective. For those of you who are just tuning in for the first time, I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I hate saying licensed because that's a term that's been utilized to separate, right? To disenfranchise folk. It's a form of capitalism and white supremacy. Those are my thoughts. I still took the test. You know what I mean? I still took the test. And not because it's something that I want to utilize, that I'll ever work with insurance companies or what have you. I just did it to do it, right? A lot of times I just be doing different stuff to see where I'm at with it. Can I go in here and take this white supremacist test and pass it? And if I didn't pass, I was never taking it again. But that's my get down, right? That's my get down. And so when I come back here and we're talking about Damar Hamlin, I want to look at some areas that haven't been talked about. And it's not an attempt to go viral like the guy who was sitting on the couch who rightfully talked about contracts in the NFL and the lack of guarantees. But I want to go a little bit beyond that. I want to go beyond the looking glass. And so just to give an update, yeah, and it's intentional, shout out to Lakeisha. It's intentional that you can't see my old face because it says for better viewing, tune in on what? YouTube at PhilMSW. Right? I got a whole situation that's popping off over there. So feel free, everybody, go ahead over there so you can see my beautiful face. You get to see this big, beautiful beard. Right? I moisturized the scalp. The scalp is kind of shiny. It's kind of shimmery right now. You know what I mean? So go ahead over to YouTube and hit the subscribe button. So regarding Damar Hamlin. So it's been 8 days since his injury where he died on the field in a Monday Night Football game. And so, yes, he continues to recover. I saw a tweet that he posted where he was showing love to everybody with the love that he puts out, it's come back times 3. He can now talk. He's been transferred from a Cincinnati hospital where the injury occurred while playing against the Bengals, and now he's in a Buffalo hospital where he's receiving treatment. It's a beautiful thing, right? It's a beautiful thing that this brother is alive, that he is continuing to make progress, right? And so I'm sitting and thinking about the journey that he's had. Again, I empathize with him. I love the love that he received, right? I love that he received the love that he received. But my biggest question is, it's starting to dissipate. And why? Right? It's starting to dissipate. And why? So he spent the last week fighting for his life. Right? Literally fighting for his life. He died on the football field. And notice the language that they use when they're discussing what took place, cardiac arrest. His heart stopped. If he walked away, if everybody walked away and nobody came to offer CPR to resuscitate him, he would have stayed dead. It's a reality. But we recognize why they're saying cardiac arrest instead of saying he died on the football field. Because that's what happened in medical terms. What would that mean to society? What would that mean to parents who allow their children to play football or other professionals who play football? And with that being said, I'm glad he's making a miraculous recovery. But I'm starting to see the conversation wane a little bit. Now, before I get ahead of myself, I want to say some great things happened for him. Great things happened for him. The Bills and the NFL made a contractual gesture. And notice the language, gesture, that is a continuation of the outpouring of love in the direction of Damar Hamlin. And what they did was they guaranteed his 4-year, $3.64 million contract. Because technically, because he's on the IR, injured reserve, he would only get a fraction of that. And so think about it. He had to die in order to get a guaranteed contract from the NFL. Literally had to die. Think about those individuals who might have multiple concussions who can't play, who have a torn bicep, who have a torn ACL. They lose money. They lose money. This was a gesture. Why? Because of the people. Because of everybody tweeting out their love. The microscope was on the NFL to get this right. Again, how do you make a cigarette safe? I have no idea. But they did, quote unquote, right by him by guaranteeing his contract. Right? And so on Saturday, the NFL went on. Because why? It's business as usual, right? And so we saw players experience devastating violence, play after play, as we watch, rooting for our favorite teams, hoping they bring us fleeting joy while fulfilling our carnivorous desires. I'm not going to lie, I tuned in, right? I tuned in. And I'm sitting here reading some of the notes that I wrote, and I highlighted in red, to be human is to be a walking contradiction. It's just a matter of where on the continuum you fall. So yes, I have all of this critique about the NFL, about football in general. If it went away, I wouldn't bat an eye. I wouldn't lose sleep in any capacity. I wouldn't feel sorry for anybody who couldn't make a living playing football. I just wouldn't. That's not how I'm wired. Okay? But I recognize the contradiction in me saying, you know what, I watched it for a few plays of a few games. Because again, Law and Order was reruns. Netflix for the $25 that I pay a month so everybody else could use it. Don't be nothing on there. I be in Nollywood. And so, yes, I watched. And so, just like you, despite hearing or seeing a player that died on the field, which again, and I continue to reiterate that point because he died. Right? He died. And we still tuned in and watched. And so that was one specific play, right? But how many plays took place over the weekend? Approximately 1,800, right? So we're talking about 1,800 plays where players, and I hate even using the term players, right? Humans, like literal human beings, were put at risk of incurring injury that can impact them in the short term or the long term. This is what we're watching for entertainment. And this is an indictment on me as well. Again, when I'm having these conversations, you may hear me reiterate some things because I'm trying to reconcile it for myself with all the information that I have. Out of boredom, I watch people hurt one another. It doesn't sit right with me. And it's something that I need to continue to unpack. And so in order to get to the answer that I'm looking for self, because I can't do that for you, I need to continually interrogate my belief system. Continue to ask questions and ask better questions so I can get to an answer. And so, with that being said, here we are 8 days later, and the chatter has lessened regarding Damar Hamlin. Yes, I still see people, reposting like updates, but we're back to business as usual. And can we say that we're surprised? Right? Before you want to push back and say, no, I'm still thinking about Damar Hamlin. Think about it as a beautiful thing. But consider Breonna Taylor. Consider George Floyd. Consider Sandra Bland. Consider Ahmaud Arbery. And the reason why I highlight them is because they were visible murders that left our collective consciousness with little change to business as usual. George Floyd was what? The summer of 2020? And now here we are. What truly has changed? I'm here in Philly, and I saw on the local news channel, on their website rather, I saw Lower Merion Police, the home of one Kobe Bean Bryant, God bless the dead. I saw them pull over a black woman in a Volvo because she was allegedly tailgating another driver. They asked her to get out the car. She requested a supervisor. They walked up to the car with guns drawn. They tased her and pulled her out of the vehicle. And she was subsequently arrested, but released with no charges. This 3 years post George Floyd. This 30 years post Rodney King. We, 60, 70 years past the civil rights movement. Like, think about this, right? And so it's no surprise, because if we're moving past murders of black folk, and I don't use the unarmed term, because even if you're armed, you still shouldn't be killed. And so when I saw that in this write-up for this black woman who was violated by police, I see unarmed. That's like the lowest common denominator to say, hey, she really did nothing. But also what that means is, if we're thinking about it, it could give license to harm those who are armed. Because in reality, that shouldn't matter when it comes to interactions with the police. But back to Damar Hamlin and how this conversation is almost all but gone. which is scary, right? I'm scared for Damar Hamlin. Despite seeing his beautiful smile and his encouraging tweets, his career is over. And the unfortunate part is, I don't even want to say unfortunate. The reality is that hasn't registered for him yet. Nor should it. Why? Because he's fighting for his life. He's actively fighting for his life, and being alive is his primary goal right now. Another beautiful thing is that he clearly has supports. I know in Buffalo he has his family by his side, right? Which will definitely be needed once he realizes that he can't play football anymore. The game that he gave so much mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually to for much of his life nearly cost him anything. And he has nothing worthwhile to show for it. And so what's the trade for nearly dying? A couple $1 million in a guaranteed contract? Several more million in a GoFundMe? I don't know. The trade-off just doesn't seem worth it for me. And these are things that he's going to be faced with. Now, I know Black Republican Twitter, y'all gonna be like, yo, he can make investments. He might be on Earn Your Leisure. Right? Black capitalism gonna save us. I'll leave that for y'all to have that conversation. But I know in listening to athletes talk about the end of their career, when they have to retire because of old age or because of their body, they have difficulties. Now imagine if the sport that you loved, the thing that you loved, caused you to die and be resuscitated. I don't know. Hopefully he doesn't have regret. Right? Hopefully this isn't the onset of ongoing health issues, because we know CTE is real and CTE is the extreme. We know depression. We know anxiety. I know he was at the University of Pittsburgh for 5 years. Hopefully he has a degree where he can transition into the workforce and find meaning. Because unfortunately, so much of his identity has been wrapped up in being a football player. And we see with athletes time and time again, it never lasts. That's why they try to go on ESPN and they try to get on radio and they try to do different things to try to stay a part of the game. Because what else they going to do? And so that's my fear for him. What's going to happen when the cameras are no longer here six months from now and he's sitting at home? That $4 million will go quick. I don't know. You know, I don't want to be one of them thoughts and prayers people, but because it's going to take tangible action to assist him as he navigates this. Casey Ryback says a lot of athletes don't invest wisely. It's not even a matter of investing wisely. We have this idea of, and granted, that's true for some, right? But I was listening to a podcast, Bomani Jones and Dominic Foxworth. They were talking about the salaries, right, of those lesser tier athletes who don't make that much money, right? So he's in Buffalo. He's going to make $4 million. The IRS is going to take half of that. So he's left with $2 million. Okay. So he has $2 million. Where does he live? He's not living in a row home next to me. You can't be an NFL player and live in a row home. This isn't the 1960s. You can make yourself an easy target. So now, we're talking about the increase in cost for houses. If you want to live in an area, let's say like Lower Merion, Those are a couple $1 million homes. So he can't afford that. But let's say he get a modest home. What, $500,000? He could afford to stay there for a little bit. But what's going to happen is that money's going to dry up. And he's not going to be able to afford it. And this happens with so many athletes. Right? We talk about the lifestyle. We might see the bling that they have. They might have a chain for $100,000 that's probably rented. Usually it's rented. A jeweler will let them hold this so they can prop them up. Shout them out on their page. Yo, go to X and Y and Z jeweler. But the reality is, it's the everyday things. It's the cost of living. These people don't make that much money. I know for you and I, when we hear a couple million dollars, it's different. I probably could get away with staying in this same row home and nobody would know I have $2 million. But if I'm an athlete on the Philadelphia Eagles, it hits a little bit different. Let's see what else is. See if anything's happening in the IG chat regarding this topic. JPZ says, I doubt housing is the same cost in Buffalo. Why would you doubt that? Right? This is America. Have you tried to buy eggs recently? Right? I used to get 3 dozen eggs. That's now up to about $15. So think about the cost of living in all of these places. Buffalo is still New York. Right? So it's not like he's living on a farm for $100,000. That's not the reality, right? These things cost, and it costs to live. Marla says, and not to mention how many households and family members these athletes are carrying. I didn't bring that up just because I thought that was a given. The people who were sitting by his side, his mother, his brother, his family, he's taking care of them as well. A noble effort. Right? Because you want to lead, you want to provide for your family, but ultimately you got to have money coming in. And his money stops now, right? He doesn't qualify for a pension. He hasn't played long enough. And if he did play long enough for a pension, that's what, in your 40s or 50s. Think about Allen Iverson. In athletic terms, monetarily, Allen Iverson is broke. Right? But he has this money coming in from Reebok when he turns about 50 something. I think it's like $50 million. Something to that effect. And so, yeah, that's the game. Right? That's the game. And so, I'm concerned. Right? Like and that's just the healer in me. The individual who works in, with black males navigating their mental health. When you can't do what you love, it takes a toll on you. Because you have to redefine your identity. You have to truly learn and sit with who you are. And a lot of times you have no idea. Okay, says, what's your opinion on all the killing in our city? I mean, I don't say this haphazardly, but killing's been happening since the beginning of time. Now, we're talking about, is it more sensationalized because we have more outlets to learn about murders, right? Everywhere we look, the propaganda that Philadelphia is a violent city is being pushed in our faces. I don't subscribe to that. Philadelphia is a safe city. Think about the millions of people in Philadelphia versus the number of violent crimes and specifically gun-related homicides that take place. But if we push this narrative in the media, and it just goes to show you how influential the media is, it would have you thinking that that Philadelphia hasn't experienced this before. That this is somehow new. Go check the murder rates of the late 80s, early 90s. You're going to see some things. Right? You're going to be like, wow, these numbers are on par, given the number of citizens in the city and what have you. So yeah, I don't really have thoughts on that. I don't have answers to gun violence that will make people happy. Right? We're talking about addressing poverty. We're talking about 20 years. You know, the gun violence that we see today is a product of what took place 20 years ago. And the gun violence 20 years from now is a byproduct of what we're doing today. And so if we're not working in unison, and as far as community, as far as government, as far as personal responsibility, then we're never going to get anywhere. This will continue to be a problem. But you know, you can't necessarily say that, right? Because why? Because you want to give people hope. No different than the NFL. You got to give people hope that folk ain't going to be out here getting, you know, permanently hurt. Because if you don't have hope, what do you have? And so we're going to keep the party going. I spent a little bit more time on that than I desire, but we still rocking and rolling. So I was looking at, you know, I just happened to be on CNN. I try to avoid news outlets, and I saw that a 6-year-old in Newport News, Virginia, shot and wounded their teacher in a classroom. And I was like, Lord, wildest shit that I've ever heard. Not surprised, but that's some wild shit. Right? And so, you know, good news is the teacher, she's expected to survive. She got shot through the hand and through the chest. She was able to still get the other students out into the hallway, right? Get them to safety. The student was apprehended, and you know, and reading it, and they're talking about a 6-year-old. The student was apprehended first by a school official who they were fighting. And I'm just like, man, you can't corral a 6-year-old. Now again, I do have a infant son, and he be moving about. And I be trying not to squeeze him. You know what I mean? But if I'm in a school, I'm gonna grip the kid up, right? But again, I'm bigger, and I don't want to have like an ableist type of lens on this, because I recognize individuals. Yes, a 6-year-old may be difficult to corral for, and that was some of the language that was used for certain individuals. So that's not lost upon me either. Subsequently, the police came, took the child into custody, and took them to a detention center. And so I was just fascinated by the story. Number one, because I haven't heard much about it. I haven't seen everybody tweeting about it like they tweeted about Damar Hamlin. I'm sure some folk are hearing this for the first time. That's telling to me. But in reality, it's not telling, because we know what this society is built upon, which is violence, right? And we recognize the lack of care that and appreciation and so many other things when it comes to the welfare of our teachers, right? Because what happens if you post everywhere that a 6-year-old shot a teacher? You're gonna have calamity, right? You're going to have calamity, because if kids are not at home, they're where? They're in school, right? And also the reason of it is the NFL has a built-in audience. Millions and millions of people. And so millions of people watch somebody die on television. And so you have to respond to that. They had to respond to that. All these news outlets have to cover it. Unfortunately, nobody gives a damn about this teacher, except her family, maybe the parents whose kids that are being taught. But we're not going to pretend like shared humanity is a thing. Not here. And then also where it took place, Virginia. We know how Virginia gives it up. Joe Manchin and all them folk. It's not necessarily for the people. All right. And so regarding the 6-year-old, Virginia law doesn't allow a 6-year-old to be tried as an adult. Also, they're too young to be committed to the custody of the Department of Juvenile Justice if found guilty. A judge would have the authority to revoke a parent's custody and place a child under the purview of the Department of Social Services, so your local child welfare agency. I mean, I feel like that's all but a given. That's definitely going to take place. Right? Especially if the mother, who legally owned the gun, right? She legally owned the gun. If no charges are brought up against her, which there is a possibility, it is a misdemeanor if she didn't adequately store the gun, put it in a safe, put it out of the reach of the child. As far as my opinion on it, and I had to sit and think about this, right? Like, should she face criminal charges or be jailed, the parent? And I've saw all across different blogs, like, you know, throw the parent in jail. And that's such low-hanging fruit. That's the reason why I'm here to offer some critical analysis. Just some things to think about. May not change your mind, but I know for me, it's the lens that I look at it from, right? And so, you know, I'm abolitionist light, which means I'm still understanding all that the title of being having a perspective of an abolitionist entails. Okay? However, I don't feel she should go to jail. I don't feel she should face criminal charges, right? Because ultimately the goal for me is, how does that reduce harm that this teacher and those students experienced? And we know jail is a reactionary punitive measure. And so what is putting this mom on probation, putting her here in jail for 60 days, what does that do? Because ultimately, if she doesn't give a flying F, then she's going to be right back out doing the same thing, right? Being negligent. What does restorative justice look like for this family, for this mother, for this child? Does it look like being in intense therapy, trying to have the child be able to decipher between right and wrong, having the child apologize to the teacher, having the mother go to parenting classes to truly understand? And I'm just throwing this out there, I'm thinking, what'll probably take place. Understanding the consequences of her actions or lack thereof. I don't know. But I do know throwing somebody in jail doesn't really do anything. It doesn't help the situation. When I heard the story, I started thinking about, like, yo, is this child a psychopath? Right? Is this child a sociopath? Now, as a clinician, as someone who's worked with children, I recognize that some of these clinical labels, these diagnoses, can't be given to a 6-year-old, right? So for an individual to be deemed a psychopath, which is antisocial personality disorder, got to be 18 years of age or older. To get conduct disorder, have to be over 10, I want to say, 10 and older. And so here we have a 6-year-old. It reminds me of that Law and Order episode where the girl, I think it was SVU, and the little girl with the little pigtail, she killed the neighbor. Lured them. Jenny. It's crazy that her name pops in my head. Jenny killed the little boy. And she ended up going to family court, being released back into the custody of her mom. They were out in the hallway. And it might have been SVU. It might have been a regular Law and Order. But she's sitting there looking at a little boy with this look in her eye. And just like, you might have some psychopathic tendencies, right? And so, in thinking about that, what is the course of treatment? Intense therapy, intense supervision, right? Understanding what the environment is of the child in school. Why this teacher specifically? Why didn't they shoot a peer? Now, I don't know the scuttlebutt regarding the relationship between the child and the teacher. Maybe they had some beef. I don't know how you beef with a 6-year-old. But some 6-year-olds eat paint, eat glue. I don't understand that behavior either. Right? But then we understand it when we take a step back and think about it from an age appropriate perspective. They get, kids get upset, you take their favorite toy away. But how are they coping? Where did they learn to cope in this manner? Again, understanding the environment. Is the 6-year-old playing video games? Is the 6-year-old on TikTok? Is the 6-year-old watching movies? Seeing people get shot who then end up getting back up. Thinking, oh, she'll probably just get back up after I shoot her. This is what they're going to have to go through and understand. And subsequently, what I think is going to happen is they're going to take that child away from their mother. Right? Because we recognize that child welfare is police adjacent. And so if they can't get you criminally, they'll get you through this avenue. And depending upon how much privilege this mother has, determines whether she'll be able to get her child back or not. I saw a post on one of the blogs, a comment on one of the blogs, and it was like, well, we know this isn't a black student, because they would have had a picture of him at 3 with a water gun in his hand. And I chuckled. I did chuckle. Because we recognize how black folk are portrayed for those who commit violent acts. They're going to go find that picture of you. So, I the only thing that I do know is child welfare will probably be involved, and probably will be involved for a long time. But I do hope that she doesn't face criminal charges as a result of this, right? Because if you go out of your way to legally get a handgun, right? I don't know if you're just going to be storing it all willy nilly, right? Or maybe you did. Maybe it was a lapse in judgment for a moment in time, but that shouldn't cost you. It shouldn't have this price, from my perspective. And the last thing on this, and I posted about this, I teased it a little bit on my social media, right? A GoFundMe has been set up by the teacher who was shot's sister. As of a couple hours ago, it reached $70,000. And I juxtapose that with the $7 million that Damar Hamlin's GoFundMe received. And again, I said, of course. Of course. It speaks to what it is that we value. And it's not to disparage those who've contributed to Damar Hamlin. But think about it, right? We often see, have those conversations. Teachers should be compensated like athletes. And here we are, right? In a different realm, where the disparity continues to show itself. 7:51. I feel good about this. You know what I mean? I got the new glasses on. They not new. I just had them for a very long time because I lost my Malcolm X glasses. Again, GoFundMe, hashtag Quantify LLC. I might be back Thursday. We're going to see how this go. Thanks for tuning in. Deuces.